Hello, welcome to my channel. You're watching What Helen Reads and I'm Helen, and today I've got another dark romance recommendation video for you. If you're new to my channel, then you might not know, but I post videos every Monday and then every other Thursday, and I predominantly read dark and mafia romances. In fact, every second Monday of the month I dedicate my video to mafia romances, so that is called Mafia Romance Monday. And therefore when I'm doing dark romance recommendations, they generally don't include mafia romances, although technically mafia romances are dark, but in my mind they are two separate subgenres of romance. So today I have 10 dark romance recommendations for you. None of them are strictly mafia romances. There's a couple that are technically mafia adjacent, but not strictly mafia romances, and I'll take you through those now. So the first book that I want to talk about is Debt by Nina Jones. Now this is a book that I actually read last year, and I've never talked about this book because it was going to be part of a collab video with another booktuber, but unfortunately we were never able to make that video happen, and therefore while I did read that book in anticipation of that video, I never really talked about the fact that I'd read this one. But I feel like now enough time has passed, but I feel it's okay for me to talk about this and let you know my thoughts on it, because it was an absolutely fantastic read and I really enjoyed this. This was actually the second book that I'd read by this author. The first one is Take Me With You, which I also have recommended in a dark romance recommendation video before. So this is definitely a revenge plot. It's a hidden identity, workplace romance, definitely some consensual non-consent scenes in here, and very much a tortured hero. And we were following two characters, Mia and Tax. Now the prologue of this book contains some very dark content. You're going to want to check your trigger warnings for this one. Indeed, all of these books, obviously they're all dark romances, you do need to be mindful of the content warnings before you go into any of these books. But in particular, the prologue of this book is quite difficult to read because Tax, our hero, did suffer something quite horrific when he was just a teenage boy. After that incident, he and his sister were hell-bent on revenge and getting retribution for what happened to him. And over the years, because this is then a 15-year time jump, where we jump 15 years in the future, Tax and his sister are now sort of grown people. They've actually gathered quite a lot of wealth, and also slowly but surely they have sought revenge on every single person who wronged them 15 years before. And now there's one person left on their list, and that is Mia, our main heroine in this one. And so Tax is now coming for her, and he feels that once he's finally got revenge on Mia, then he can put this whole incident behind him. Now he does have a plan in mind about how he's going to get revenge on Mia. Meanwhile, Mia is a very interesting character because she has a quite senior role in a company. She's also got a sexual fantasy where she actually has a rape fantasy, and she really is looking for someone to act out her consensual non-consent fantasies with. Now her friend tells her about this agency. It's like an agency for people with kinks, and you can sign up to it, fill in a form to share your preferences, and then pay for someone to kind of help you enact those fantasies. So the moment where Tax is about to come into Mia's life coincides with this moment, because she has filled in a form. She has arranged for someone to basically kind of stalk her, take her and have sex with her in a consensual non-consent situation. Now she doesn't know when this is going to happen, to add to kind of the suspense element, the shock factor if you like. She doesn't know when this is going to happen, but there's going to be like a 2-week window where at any point this might happen to her. And so when she comes home one day from work and there's a mysterious man in her house, she thinks this is the person that she's employed to carry out this scene with her, and in fact it isn't, and it is Tax. But she doesn't know that, so she thinks what happens while he's in the house is consensual. Meanwhile, he thinks he's actually assaulting her. So this is how this book starts. Like I said, it's very dark. And then he kind of disappears from her life, and a couple of days later the person that she's paid actually does turn up to act out this scene with her, and she's like, wait, if this guy is coming to do this now, who was the other guy in my house that we had a bit of a liaison with, and then their story goes from there. So I don't want to say too much more because I don't want to give anything else away, but that is how it starts. Next up then, I've got Surrender by Sam Mariano and Laura Lovett. Now this was originally published as Sophie's Surrender and then was kind of renamed Surrender and slotted into Sam Mariano's Coastal Elite series. So this is actually book 4 in that series. So this one is a dark romance. It's a forced proximity romance, captor captive, an absolutely obsessed possessive hero. There's definitely scenes of dubcon in here. This actually takes place in college and starts with a Halloween party, and we were following Sophie and Sylvan. Sophie is, like I say, a college student, and she's kind of been avoiding social interactions, mainly because she was the victim of an assault when she was a couple of years younger. It was by a boyfriend, someone she thought she could trust. And as a result of this incident, obviously, she has then very much kept to herself, is very cautious about going out, certainly doesn't want to accept drinks from anyone that she hasn't seen poured. And so really is kind of like hiding from the world, doesn't really go to parties, doesn't take part in the social side of college life. However, her friends and her mum are really encouraging her to go out and have fun. And so eventually she's kind of arm wrestled, if you like, forced into going out for a Halloween party. There she stumbles into our hero Sylvan, who is dressed like a Viking and instantly takes a shine to Sophie. Now he is a Sam Mariano hero, so he does try and literally back her into a corner, but very much realizes and senses that she has been assaulted in the past and that she does carry a little bit of trauma / PTSD from this incident. And so he does back off, but not that far, because like I say, it is a Sam Mariano hero. He sets his sight on her and decides that he's going to keep her captive for the weekend and basically, you know, force her to fall in love with him. Now, Sophia does obviously attempt to get away from him. She even goes so far as to speak to Sylvan's father and say, hey, you know, did you know your son is keeping me captive here? But the father is actually a very dangerous man, and he is not too happy that this girl might be threatening Sylvan. And he basically says to Sylvan, get her in line, make her fall in love with you, or I will might have to take matters into my own hands. So Sophie is definitely not safe in this environment. But like I say, Sylvan is absolutely obsessed with her. Yes, he's going to be very manipulative, very coercive, but he also does care for her a lot. And, you know, while he is going to force her to fall in love with him, he is going to do it in a very Sam Mariano way, and so we're not going to hate him for it, let's put it like this. One of the things I like about this book is that we do see a reappearance of Dare, and if you've read any other books in this series, you'll definitely know who Dare is. You may have heard about Dare. Dare is a particularly dangerous character, is absolute a psychopath. I love his book. So his book is Even If It Hurts. That's the start of this series, and I absolutely love that book, but I really don't like Dare as a character. At least I didn't until I saw him in this book, and it's left me with a little bit of hope that Dare maybe can be redeemed in the future. But let's see, because Sam Mariano is continuing to write books in this series, and I'm sure Dare will continue to make an appearance. So if you haven't read this series yet, I would highly recommend. Now, because this was actually written before the Coastal Elite series was kicked off, then I think you could read this out of order, but it's definitely worth picking up the other books in the series before you jump into this one for sure. But highly recommend. I absolutely love Sylvan as a character. Next up, I want to recommend Born for Silk by Nicci Harris, and this is book 1 in her Cradled Common series, and it's a dark dystopian romance. It's actually set about 1,000 years in our future, and definitely there has been an apocalyptic kind of situation on Earth, and humans have been forced to adapt. Because now the parts of the planet are really uninhabitable, resources are really, really scarce, and because of technology, humans, or some humans, have definitely been modified. So in this world there are two kind of I wouldn't even say factions, but it's kind of, society is made up of two things. One is the trade and one is the crown. Now the crown is kind of like the ruling class, if you like. They are made up of modified humans, and our hero in this one, Rome, is actually the king. So he is the biggest, baddest man in the community, and therefore he's basically the king. Absolutely modified, huge kind of guy, and very much in control. And as well as there being the king, there's sort of like lords and a whole kind of structure, if you like, that sits around the crown. Then you have the trade, and the trade is really a class system where when humans are born, they are kind of aligned to a particular trade. And the deal is that you kind of just are allocated a role in society, and in return you'll get food, accommodation and protection from the crown. So you are born into specific roles. Now this one is called Born for Silk because our heroine in this one, Asta, is a silk girl, and her trade, the thing that she's been born to do, is to conceive the heir of the king. Because the kings are so big and they're modified, not every human woman can bear the child of the king of these modified humans. And so these silk girls are very, very special because their lineage has proven time and again that they are able to not only conceive, carry these babies to term and deliver healthy babies from these kind of like modified humans. Now it's still a very, very dangerous environment though, and the heir to the crown would be a valuable commodity indeed, and so it needs to be protected at all costs. And therefore these silk girls are kind of put into groups of about 6 other women. So Asta is part of a group of about 5 or 6 other women who become kind of like the king's harem, if you like. But the girls themselves don't know who the king is going to choose and sleep with, and they are supposed to wear blindfolds at night, and they will be visited by a man. They don't know who that is, but it's either the king or one of his lords. And then once they've conceived, they all have their babies. Their babies are brought up together in this kind of like, you know, nursery, but no one knows who the true heir is apart from the king himself. Now, of course, our hero Rome is going to end up picking Asta to be his silk girl, and she is going to learn very quickly who he is, and their romance is going to go from there. I really, really enjoyed this book. It was very interesting. I think Nikki Harris did a fantastic job of building this world, and I'm really, really looking forward to the next book in the series, which is coming out really soon, which is Born for Lace. Next up then, we've got Corrupt by Penelope Douglas, and this is book 1 in the Devil's Night series. Now this is the only book I've read in the series so far, but I'm really, really intrigued to read more because I really did enjoy this one. I just haven't had the chance to get around to reading any more in this series yet. This is kind of like a new adult dark romance because it very much starts where the main characters are just sort of teenagers, but there is a bit of a time jump. So after the initial events of Devil's Night, there's a bit of a time jump, and then they're kind of all then at college, so a little bit older in their early 20s. This is very much a revenge plot. Like I say, there's a time jump, so we also get some flashbacks as well as we go through the story. And our hero and heroine in this one, so our heroine is Erica, or they call Rika, and then we have Michael as the hero. And in fact, Erica at the start of this book has a boyfriend, and that boyfriend is Michael's brother. So it's kind of a brother's girlfriend scenario as well right at the start of this book. So the premise of this one is that Michael is part of a friendship group. There's 4 of them in total, and since they've been teenagers, there is a night in town that they call Devil's Night, where they kind of wreak havoc on the local town. Now they always wear masks, so everyone knows who it is, but they wear masks so they can't kind of be identified, if you like, and they just have one night of fun when they go around just terrorizing people in the town. And in particular what they do is kind of round up a bunch of school kids. They kind of go out, they terrorize the town, like I say, then they end up going to this kind of warehouse where they have a party, and they do party style activities, and then the night is over and they go their separate ways. Now our heroine in this one is a couple of years younger than Michael, but she's always kind of really had a thing for him. She's very much idolised him. Yes, she's got a boyfriend, and yes, it is Michael's brother, but she's never really been in love with the brother. It's not a boyfriend she would have picked for herself. It's just an expectation from the family, really, because her parents knew their parents, and it's kind of expected of her that she'll date this other guy. But really she has always had a soft spot for Michael. She really, really fancies him and wants to be with him. But she's a couple of years younger than him though, like I've said. When Michael and his friends go off to college, they think Devil's Night is finally over, but no, because they decide to come back to college, regroup, and then have Devil's Night. And I think at this point then the Michael and his friends are about 19 years old. Erica is just 16, and they come back to school to round up everybody to start causing havoc, and she decides to slip out and join. Now you're supposed to be 18 or over to join, but she kind of slips out at 16 and goes with them, and they let her go with them. So she kind of spends the night with Michael and his friends. Now several things do happen. The night doesn't end that well, and in the morning there is video evidence of what has happened, and as a result Michael's friends, his 3 friends, end up going to prison for what they are kind of caught doing on camera. Now they very much believe that Erica is the one that shared this video footage, and therefore it's her fault that they are in prison, and so during the length of their incarceration they plot their revenge. And so, like I say, there was then a bit of a time jump for when they come out of prison, and now they've come back and they're regrouping again because they are hell-bent on taking revenge on Erica for what she's done to them and making her life an absolute misery. But like I said, this is Michael and Erica's romance because Michael was the only one that didn't go to prison, and obviously he's still been in contact with Erica this whole time, and he's very torn between helping his friends take revenge and protecting Erica from them. Next up, I've got a book that I've spoken about a few times before, and this came up in my stalker romance recommendations video as well, and that is Lights Out by Navessa. This is book 1 in her Into Darkness series. Like I said, this is a dark stalker romance. It's also mafia adjacent though, not strictly mafia. It has got a touch of humour. This is kind of down as a rom-com slash stalker romance, and it has the perfect balance of humour and also kind of like suspense. So the stalking is absolutely real and very serious, but it's done in a kind of light-hearted kind of way. Not so funny, like I said, that it kind of really spoils the suspense and drama, but just enough that it breaks the amount of darkness that could otherwise be in this book. There's definitely some kink in here, and I'll explain a bit more. 2 very damaged characters, a hidden identity. There's no third act breakup in this one, which I did enjoy, and definitely toucher and die vibes. And we're following Ali and Josh. Now Ali is actually a trauma nurse, so she has seen some horrific things on the job. So she has a very stressful job, and she likes to relieve stress by kind of having a regular kind of hookup. She also very often watches these thirst trap videos that have been filmed and posted on an equivalent of like an OnlyFans site with a man in a mask, and she very much has this fantasy about a man in a mask breaking into a house and having his wicked way with her. So one night, after a very particularly stressful night at the hospital, she rings an old hookup and says, hey, how about we hook up? In fact, how would you like to enact this fantasy with me where you kind of wear a mask and you know, have your wicked way with me? And this guy is like, well, thanks for reaching out, but did you realise it's actually been 2 months since we last spoke to each other, and I've kind of moved on, I've got a girlfriend now, so not interested, thank you. And she is a bit taken aback. She can't believe that it's actually been 2 months, but she's very busy at her job, and so, you know, time flies when you're having fun and all of that. So she said, okay, no problem, thanks, anyway, no hard feelings. However, her hookup decides to show his roommate the text message from this girl, and the coincidence here is that Josh is in fact the guy in the mask who posts the thirst trap videos. And not only that, but he's been stalking Ali for a while because he first spotted her when his roommate brought her home. He's kind of been obsessed with her ever since, looked into her history, found out who she was, and has kind of been doing a bit of light stalking since then. But now he's even more intrigued, right, because she is very interested in his videos, and he starts thinking to himself, wow, this girl might actually be the one for me. What if she not only has this fantasy, but she genuinely means it? How would she react if I did break into her house and had my wicked way with her? And he decides to test his theory and, you know, up the ante with his stalking, and you know, their romance goes from there. I really enjoy this because there's lots of banter between them. He really does kind of mess with her. She's trying to figure out who he is. Doesn't take her too long to figure it out though, which I really did enjoy as well, because sometimes I think, you know, it's so obvious who someone is and it's dragged out a bit too long, but she figures out pretty quickly who it is, and they have a bit of cat and mouse play with each other, a lot of banter. It's really great, and I love this because there's a plot twist in here that I didn't see coming. I very much thought this was going to be a stalker romance just solely set on them, but something else happens that really turns the tide in the story and sets them out on a bit of a trajectory together to solve another little problem that they come across. So definitely recommend that read. Next up, I've got Kiss the Villain by Rina Kent. This is book 1 in her new series, the Villain series, which is a spin-off from The Legacy of Gods. Now this is an MM romance, it's a dark romance, and another one that is mafia adjacent. This is strictly not mafia, there's no kind of mafia action in here. However, obviously this is set in the Rina Kent universe. She does have some mafia stories in here, some mafia characters, and because this is very much butting right up against some of those other characters, like I say, it is mafia adjacent, definitely secret society element to this one. In addition to that, it's age gap, it's an academic setting, it's technically a student-teacher relationship, hidden identity, definitely some non-con, dub-con scenarios in here, enemies to lovers, very forbidden, damaged hero, a revenge plot, and definitely one of our characters, if not both of them, are psychopaths. We are following Gareth and Caden. Now if you've read the Legacy of the Gods series, you'll know that Gareth is actually Killian's brother. He's the hero from book 1 of the Legacy of the Gods series, and he's very much been a side character in all of the stories. We've seen Gareth quite a bit, but the Gareth that we thought we knew is very, very different from who Gareth really is. And finally in this book we actually get to find out who the real Gareth is. And while all this time he's been pretending to be the good brother, definitely less psychopathic than Killian, what we actually find out is that he is a psychopath too. He's very much been hiding this, very much pretending to be normal, but this has very much screwed him up because he is absolute chaos inside. Whereas Killian was a psychopath, he was very, very controlled, exacting, very methodical. Gareth is a complete chaos when we look inside his mind. So again, very, very fascinating because we get a completely different type of psychopath, and very interesting and fascinating to follow along with his story. And then we have Caden, who is an older man, and he is in fact Gareth's professor, but he is also part of a secret society, and he is there not just to be a teacher but for other purposes. Now at the start of this book, Gareth and Caden's paths cross because Gareth is actually going to play a prank on a rival at the school, and this prank is not that nice of a prank. Obviously, Gareth is a psychopath, as I've just explained, and his plan was to frame this other guy into making it look like he'd slept with a man and that he would then wake up with cum all over him. Now, while he is trying to carry this prank out, Caden spots him, realises what he's going to do, and very much turns the tables on Gareth, and their relationship really starts from there. Their relationship is very, very toxic. They continue to have a power struggle between them because Gareth is definitely going to try and get the upper hand, get his revenge on Caden for what happens in that particular introductory scenario. But it doesn't matter what Gareth does or what he tries, Caden is always going to be one step ahead of him. Like I said, this is a very kind of toxic relationship between them. They are absolutely two alpha males, very much clashing in their relationship, so it does get quite violent, I will say. But equally, it's an absolutely fascinating read, and once we start to uncover exactly who Caden is and why he's there, the plot really, really does start to pick up, and then we get a lot of interesting reveals that really add a lot of heart and emotion to this story as well. Next up, we've got Severed Ties by Montana Fyre. This is book 1 in the Tainted Love series. This is a dark stalker romance, also mafia adjacent, because this is a spin-off from her Frost Industries series, and that is definitely featuring the St. James family, who are very much part of a mafia organisation. Now in this one we're following Tommy, who is the enforcer for that family, and Clara, who is the PA to one of the heroines from that series. Now Clara does know that the family dabbles in criminal activity, but she very much is on the legal side of the business, and so Tommy and Clara's paths don't cross too often. However, their characters actually first met in one of the books from that other series that I mentioned called death in winter, I believe it was. And Tommy ends up actually rescuing Clara at that point. Now, Tommy becomes absolutely obsessed with Clara, and he becomes compelled to check on her on a daily basis to make sure that she's okay. But he, of course, doesn't tell her that he's checking up on her. And so this starts a stalking situation, because Tommy goes from just checking in on her to get visual eyes on her, making sure she's still okay, to literally go on full on stalking and following her every move for every minute that he's got time available. But from that encounter in that book, 9 months pass, and this is the start of this story where Tommy and Clara finally kind of end up back in close proximity with each other. Because while Tommy is, you know, staking her place out, stalking her, he sees her come out of her apartment, and then she goes to cross the road and she nearly gets run over by a car, and he obviously intercepts and makes sure that she is safe. Now, he does save her life, but she is clipped slightly by the car, so she has injured her leg, and therefore there's a bit of caretaking going on, because he makes sure she gets back to her apartment. He calls her boss to say, hey, she's not coming into work today, and he makes sure that she has everything she needs and rests while her leg recovers. And of course then they have now had another interaction with each other, and over the course of the next couple of weeks they see each other more and more frequently, and Tommy's obsession continues to grow. Now, Clara is a character who's very much hidden her true identity, even to her boss, because she's actually a woman on the run. Her father is a criminal, and when she was younger he kind of forced her to take part in his criminal activities, to the point where she was actually captured by some bad people, like a bad family, and tortured. So she has got some scarring to her body, and so she keeps very much to herself. Like I say, she's a woman on the run. She escaped from her father and from these men, and she doesn't want anyone to know who she is, so she's been keeping herself very much to herself. But of course her past is going to come back to haunt her, and when Tommy finds out exactly who she is and who's after her, obviously he's going to stop at nothing to make sure that she is safe. Next up then we have Resurrection by Siobhan Davis. This is book 1 in the Sainthood Boys of Lower High series, and this is a dark high school bully romance. It's part 1 of a 4-part series that all follow the same kind of group of people, shall I say, because this is in fact a reverse harem as well. And in this one we're following Saint, Galen, Kaz, Theo, and our heroine Harlow. In addition to it being a reverse harem and a dark bully romance, it's also enemies to lovers, step siblings, forced proximity, damaged heroine, a scarred heroine, and a revenge plot as well. Now what we learn in this one is that Harlow is a kind of very damaged, very traumatized person, because when she was just a teenager she was kidnapped by some very bad people, tortured and held at ransom, and eventually she was ransomed and she was able to come home, but she is very scarred from this experience. After that experience, her dad kind of put her through quite some rigorous training. She's had some combat experience, learned to defend herself, and also been trained to use a variety of different weapons. Now, I've kept all of this information from her mum, and at the start of this book her father is actually killed in a car accident, and she's still only 18, but she is extremely devastated by the loss of her father. And she then kind of goes on a bit of a bender. So she goes to this party. She is looking for her boyfriend. She has definitely been drinking. But when she rocks up at this party, her boyfriend is with another girl from the high school. And so she kind of breaks up with him and runs straight into the arms of Saint, Galen, Kaz, and Theo, who are known as the Sainthood. Now, the Sainthood is a criminal organisation in town, and basically they are initiated during high school, and when they graduate high school they become fully fledged members of this criminal activity. So these boys are bad news. They also have a rule where none of them can have a girlfriend individually, they have to share women, and so she kind of offers herself to them as a bit of a sacrifice, because she just wants to feel something after the loss of her father, finding out her boyfriend has been cheating on her, and so she enters into a sexual encounter with all 4 of these men. Unbeknownst to her, this is actually recorded, and the following day the recording is leaked, and then it goes rampant around school. And of course then Saint, Galen, Kaz and Theo claim her as theirs and make sure that no one else can touch her, but also at the same time attempt to make her life a living misery. What they don't realise is that she's already lost everything she could possibly lose. There's nothing really they can do to her to make her life any worse. But things are not what they seem at all, because as we dive deeper into this and figure out the relationships between all of them, we realise that Harlow has definitely got past history with each of these characters, including Saint's father, and we also find out that her mother used to date Saint's father when they were in high school, and he's still kind of got a flame for her. So now her father is gone, Saint's father can now swoop in and take back the woman that he was once in love with at high school. And so this is why I said it is also a sort of step sibling relationship, because her mother ends up getting married to Saint's father and they all move into the house with her. So it's very much in close proximity. She is now trapped in the house. You know, her mum is remarried and she's now trapped in the house with these guys who she slept with, and everyone's seen the video. And so really things start to ramp up from there. But like I said, this is very dark. There's a lot going on in the background. Everyone's keeping secrets from each other. We can't trust no one. And this first book absolutely ends on a cliffhanger. And so I haven't got to the second book in this series yet, but I'm desperate to, because things are not in a great place when we left book 1. Now my last 2 recommendations are actually trilogies. So the first one is the Tormentor series by Anna Zaires, and this is made up of 3 books. It's the Tormentor Mine, Obsession Mine and Destiny Mine. So if you want to read this one, you'll have to make your way through 3 books. And normally I don't like trilogies that follow the same couple, but I was absolutely obsessed with this trilogy. It kept me hooked. I went straight from one book to the next, because each one ended on a cliffhanger, and I really wanted this couple to find a way to be together. And this one, if you haven't read it before, I'm sure many of you have, but if you haven't read it before, it's the kind of the classic captor-captive style of romance. This is very much a dark romance. We have a Russian hero in here. There's definitely a kidnapping, captor-captive situation, and a revenge plot as well. And we were dealing with Peter and Sarah. So Peter is our Russian hero. He actually worked in the Russian military as you know, secret ops, special ops, and he had a wife and a son. Now unfortunately his wife and son were killed in a terrorist attack on their village, and Peter has pledged his life to avenging their deaths. And he knows that this kind of terrorist attack, the people behind it, were very much a part of the kind of American government, and lots of people are on his hit list, shall we say. And he's been working his way down the list, taking his revenge on all of the people that had any kind of hand or responsibility for killing his wife and child. And one of the last people on his list happens to be Sarah's husband. Now Sarah's husband was actually recently in an accident, and now he is kind of in a hospital, and he's been guarded though by bodyguards. Now Sarah always believed that her husband was actually a journalist, but that was his cover profession, because he was really a CIA agent, and he had a hand, like I said, in the demise of Peter's wife and son. And so Peter is very much trying to track down Sarah's husband to, you know, end his life, and he can't find him because he's been taken away, like I said, because he's actually been in an accident. He's never going to recover from this accident, but he's under guard. And so Peter goes to Sarah's house. He lays in wait till Sarah comes back from work one day, and then he kind of tortures her. He drugs her and attempts to torture her to find out where her husband is. And then he basically goes and unalives her husband. In that moment though, in their kind of interaction when he's in her house, he has a moment with her and he becomes obsessed with her. And so he does start to do a bit of light stalking, following her around, and she starts to very much feel that someone is following her. She also harbours quite a lot of guilt for the fact that she is likely responsible for her husband's death, and also is pretty traumatised by the fact that this man broke into her house and you know, attempted to torture her. So she's dealing with quite a lot of emotions, as well as trying to fend off this paranoia that someone is following her. Well, her paranoia turns out to be true because Peter is lying in wait, and eventually he decides he's going to make a move and he is going to kidnap her and take her captive. And he's so obsessed with her that his one goal really is to make her fall in love with him. And their story is a very difficult journey, and it traverses 3 books, like I've said, and each one definitely has a different kind of theme. We definitely get cliffhangers, and they also have to spend some time apart as well as together. And like I said, I was absolutely riveted to this series, and if you haven't read it yet, I would definitely recommend. Finally then, I thought it was time to add this trilogy to a dark romance recommendation video, because I've talked about these books on many occasions. In fact, I have dedicated vlogs to each one of the books in this series, but I've never actually put it into a dark romance recommendation video, so I thought I would today and end it with this one. And that, of course, is the Frozen Fate trilogy by Pam Godwin. This is a very long series. It is also featuring all the same characters, so breaking all of the rules. Like I said, I don't normally like trilogies that follow the same people, certainly not ones this chunky, but this is absolutely worth every minute you spend reading these books, worth every single word, and it's absolutely a masterpiece from Pam Godwin. My favourite books of 2024. So if you haven't read this yet, I highly recommend. I'm sure you've definitely heard about it. If you're a dark romance reader, then you've definitely heard about it, but if you haven't got around to reading it yet, you're intimidated by the size of this series, please don't. I would encourage you to dive in. It's absolutely fantastic. So the first one is The Hills of Shivers and Shadows. Then we have A Cage of Ice and Echoes. And then finally we have A Heart of Frost and Scars. So I'll just hold up the first one because they're very heavy, obviously. I'll hold up the first one while I'm talking about this. I'll talk about it very briefly because, like I said, if you've watched any of my videos before, then you'll know that I've spoken about this on more than one occasion, and you can go back and read my in-depth reading vlogs if you want to know more about these. But this is absolutely a dark romance. There's so many tropes and content warnings for this series, but essentially we're following 6 main characters. We have a man called Denver, who is our villain in this story. We have his 3 sons, Leonid, Wolfson and Kodiak. We have Monty, who is our heroine's husband, and we have our heroine herself, Frankie. Now, at the very start of this book, Monty and Frankie are married. They are very happily married. They have a great sex life in particular, but they have one sticking point, and that is that Monty does not want to have children, and she's recently discovered she's pregnant, and they have a major argument about this. Monty goes off in a bit of a rage, and she's obviously devastated, but is hoping that he'll come home so they can talk it through and figure things out. While he's gone, a man called Denver breaks into the house and basically kidnaps her, takes her to a remote cabin in very north Alaska. Very, very cold, very, very forbidden landscape. The only way in or out is by plane. The only one that can fly it is Denver. And Frankie finds herself trapped here, not only with Denver, but his 3 sons. Then we start to try and figure out exactly who he is, why he's brought her there, what goes on in this place, which is called the Hills of Shivers and Shadows, whether or not she can trust his sons, and how the hell she's going to escape this place and get herself home to Monty. So many things happen in this book. It is very, very dark, like I say. All of these books, obviously, I've discussed are dark. This has got some very dark themes in here, so please check all the content warnings and the trigger warnings. This is an absolutely wild ride. It's a puzzle that you really, really want to follow the clues, try and figure it out, work out what's going on. And Pam's writing is so masterful. She's so clever, the way she's weaved through these clues. Absolutely keeps you on the edge of your seat, and it's so atmospheric. You really feel like you're in this place as well. Very, very sinister kind of environment to be in, very frightening. Frankie is such an amazing heroine. She's so strong and brave and sticks true to her personality and is unwavering in her resolve to escape this place, and still is able, no matter what is done to her, no matter the horror that she faces, she stays compassionate and builds some great relationships with Denver's sons. So we definitely go on a ride from basically our first captivity, figuring out what's going on. Then we move to Cage of Ice and Echoes, which is much more a tale of survival. By the time we get to book 2, we are now in a race against time to get out of this place, because the characters who are remaining as part of this book are definitely running low on resources. They are facing a very harsh winter. They need to figure out a way to get out before they run out of food and heating. It is quite a bleak existence that they find themselves in. And then finally, in the 3rd book, this is the story of what happens when Frankie finally escapes the place that she's in and has to return to her normal life, and what that means for her, what that means for her husband, what it means for the people that have escaped with her, and how they're going to move forward with their lives. And if you've been fascinated by these and wanted to give them a go but were completely overwhelmed by the length of these books and the size of them, please don't be. Please don't let it put you off. Trust me when I say they're worth every single minute that you'll spend reading these, and I absolutely highly recommend. If you are a dark romance lover, these are an absolute must read. So there we go, that is 10 dark romance recommendations for you. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me, and all that's left for me to do is thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Ooh. However, he decides. So there we go, that is So there we go, that is 10 dark romance recommendations.